Good evening, Steeler fans. Welcome to another Wednesday night here on the Steel Curtain Network. If it's Wednesday night, you know it's time for the Curtain Call podcast. I'm your host, Geoffrey Benedict. Here with me, as always, Shannon White. Shannon, how you doing?
Well, like I was telling you before we started, I've been watching the Pirates game, so I'm kind of frustrated and frustrated. So I'm looking forward to talking some Steelers.
Frustrated. I have not heard that word. That was one of my grandpa's favorite words was frustrated.
Frustrated.
Oh yeah. My goodness, that sends me back a bit. But yeah, Pirates are the Pirates. We cheer when they win, and we try not to hurt too bad when they lose. When they break,
They're getting there. They're getting there.
They're getting there. They're gonna. You know what? World Series this year. They're winning it. It's on. But we're actually not here to talk about the Pirates. We're here to talk about the Steelers. The draft is over. This is our first show since the draft, so of course we're going to talk about it. Shannon and I have each been on different podcasts and gotten to talk a little bit about our thoughts on the Steelers draft. So today we're going to take a little bit different approach. Today is the reality check for the Pittsburgh Steelers draft class of 2023. I'm going to be your negative Nancy. I'm going to point out these people's flaws, the problems that I see in them. And then we're going to discuss where we think they're actually going to end up, how they're going to handle the NFL, and where we see them when the season rolls around and week 1 is on the table. So that's our approach today. Shannon, are you ready for me to take a heel turn here and be a negative Nancy?
Yes, I will try my best to. I might agree with you on a lot of it, but I'll try to defend the boys where I can.
All right. Okay, we're going to start off round 1. Broderick Jones. Love Broderick Jones. Great athlete. He's great out in space. You watch all the highlights you see of him. What's he doing? He's pulling. He's outside. He's out in space, and he's finding someone, and he's just destroying them. He's fantastic on those plays. The problem is when he's not out and he's running and looking for people, and he's in line and he's stuck there, and he's got to just defend against somebody. He's got to block somebody. Now, in the run game, they do a lot of zone plays. He's either moving and he's great, or he's double teaming people. He's great. There's not a lot of problems with his run game film. His run blocking, there's not many problems there at all. When you get to his pass blocking, there's some issues there. Now, obviously, I understand he didn't give up any sacks. He didn't give up a sack. I get that. But inside of that, there's a lot of problems. He'll set too wide. He'll give up inside pressure. He struggles to slide back when a player reverses. It's almost like he's looking for you to run around the arc, and he just wants to shove you while you do it. Just like when Dan Moore gets his hands on somebody, uses that length and just pushes them, bench presses them away from his quarterback. That's Broderick Jones. He loves that. He's fantastic at that. It's the moves, the inside moves. And even if you just get him gripped, like if you bull rush him, he's gonna anchor against a bull rush. But if you get him, he gets his hands on you, people can hand find out of that. There's a lot of guys who aren't going to be in the NFL who got out of it and were able to put some pressure on the quarterback. Georgia got rid of the ball. Stetson Bennett was good at moving around in the pocket, and they were able to make it work. But he is far from a polished prospect in pass defense and pass protection. And you've got to wonder, can he develop this? Is this something that's going to translate, or are we looking at, a slightly better version of Dan Moore Jr., who, moves better? Shannon, what do you think?
I like Broderick Jones. Of the two guys that were considered left tackle, you had Paris Johnson Jr., you had Broderick Jones.
Yep.
Paris Johnson Jr. was the more polished, experienced player. Whereas Broderick Jones, I think, has 19 collegiate starts with Georgia at left tackle. He has excellent length. He has excellent agility. He's nasty. They say he's got the dog in him.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, he's not fundamentally there yet. He's not a polished, finished product. He is still raw because of that lack of experience. But he done it on the highest level in the SEC for 2 national championship teams. And out of 450 snaps approximately, he gave up 0 sacks. You can work with talent.
Yeah.
You can work with length. You can work with agility. He has all that stuff, plenty of strength and the intensity. So he's going to take a little bit of time to coach up, in my opinion. But again, Pat Meyer has clay to work with. I mean, this is perfect clay to mold. And now I see him a little bit farther along than you do. I think that he will inevitably win the job in training camp. I think that he will just be too good, because I believe they want to do more outside zone play.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's one reason why they picked up Darnell Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they brought in Samalu, and they've just got a completely different upgraded offensive line now. He will be playing next to Samalu. You put him next to a seasoned, fundamentally sound veteran, I think he will be able to overcome some of his inexperience, some of his technique issues, and I think he's just going to be substantially better than Moore, to the point that he will take that by the first game. And I usually don't like to say this because Tomlin does not like to start rookies, but I think that he will win the starting left tackle position out of camp.
See, I want to bring that up because I have an opinion here on his play and where he gets assigned, right? At what point does he get that job? And to me, oftentimes when you see a rookie come out and all of a sudden the Steelers, you can tell the Steelers are grooving. They're like, this guy's going to be our starter. It's after rookie mini camp. It's after OTAs, before training camp actually starts. And when training camp actually starts, that person's already kind of plugged into that role. Mm-hmm. They're already in there, and this is what they're going to be. So I think you have rookie mini camp, and I think you have OTAs, which is going to be his first chance to face NFL talent, which I got to say, if you've got a guy who has technique issues, that he has, being able to line him across from Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt, and Cameron Hayward, three guys with very different ways of attacking you. You think you're strong. Okay, go block Cameron Hayward's bull rush. Go ahead and try that. You think you're quick on your feet. Go ahead. Block TJ Watt. You think you've got moves, you can handle their moves. Face Alex Highsmith. Face when he throws like the third straight pass rush move on you in 2 seconds. Let's see you do this. He's got a murderer's row to face there in defensive talent. And I think they're going to find out, is this guy going to be a starter this season right there? So when we get in training camp, my hope is in training camp, you already know Broderick Jones is your left tackle, and they can set Chuk Korafor and Dan Moore Jr. to fighting for that right tackle start and who's going to be the swing tackle. Because if that doesn't happen, then you've got Broderick Jones going into training camp trying to learn both left and right tackle.
Yeah.
And I think the better option is if he can win that before they get there, I think the Steelers are going to be in much better shape.
One thing about Broderick Jones that I've seen on all the film, and they've talked about it in all the evaluations, that is when we say dog or intensity, or I'm like you said, when he gets outside on the move, he's pancaking guys. He stays on them and he pancakes them. But it's the competitiveness, that intensity, that desire. If you have that, and you also have the talent, if you get the proper coaching, like you say, he's going to have great competition during camp. I think that's when he needs to start training camp as that solidified left tackle, and get a lot of them growing pains out of the way during camp and during the preseason, so that he can hit the regular season running.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to do for each of these prospects is give our chance that they just don't work out, right? What we call a bust. What's their bust chances? Broderick Jones, I give him very low, because you look throughout NFL history, man, guys with his level of talent, you don't have to be that good to stick around and still start. His size, his length, his speed, his athleticism. If you got those guys and they're polished, that's where you're talking about. You're like Orlando Pace. You're talking about your great players of history are the guys with his level of physical ability and the technique to make the most of it. Even if he doesn't get there, I mean, the odds that he's a Marvell Smith, or the odds that he's a, one of those guys that they're just good, they're just really good, is pretty high. So I give him probably a 15% bust chance just because I don't want to get into injuries. We're going to ignore injury chances. I think about 15%. I think it's very, very low.
Oh, I agree. I would say I was thinking 10, but 15 I can live with, just from the fact that going to the NFL is like, I remember Jermaine Stevens. I'm going to throw a name out there that the younger fans ain't going to remember.
Yeah, but we don't want to remember.
When you bring in a first-round guy, you have to look at so many different things. And you're looking, again, like we said, SEC, the top conference in college football, puts more guys in the NFL than anybody. He's played against NFL caliber players before, and he has held up and done a great job. So, if he was from a smaller conference, I would be more concerned. But as far as him being a bust, I'd say, around 10%.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So we're on about the same page. We're on about the same page. I think he probably starts week 1. And if he doesn't, he's starting by the end of the season.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much set. There's 3 people, for 2 spots, and the other 2 are not on his talent level.
No.
So it's just if he is really, really struggles with NFL players with NFL technique, that's the only way I don't see him starting. All right, next pick is Joey Porter Jr., the Steelers' second first-round pick or first second-round pick, however you want to look at it. Joey Porter, really good, results. Obviously, he relies a lot on keeping hands on his receivers. He wins a lot of jams, and he's very good at it. But very few college receivers beat good physical defense in routes. It's one of the reasons receivers have such a high bust rate in the NFL, is they aren't ready to face that. So when Joey Porter Jr. is really NFL level with jamming and being physical with guys, he's going to dominate almost all of the wide receivers in college football because so few of them are ready to handle that. One of my problems with him is he relies almost too much on it. And you're going to be in the NFL, and if you can't just keep hands on people, you got people knocking those hands off, how does he recover? We don't have a lot of film on him putting hands on somebody and that person taking his hands off.
Yeah.
He's going to face that in the NFL. One of the things I'm very interested in seeing is when he starts getting matched up against Deontay Johnson. Because Deontay Johnson was one of those guys in college that when you pressed him, he was better. And that's the same in the NFL. You don't see teams press cover Deontay Johnson because he's going to defeat you. Mm-hmm. He's going to beat that, and he's going to be open, and he's going to create even better separation, and you're embarrass yourself. So why do it? They just don't. So I want to see them match a Joey Porter Jr. up with a Deontay Johnson. And he's gonna make Deontay Johnson look good until he learns how to deal with it. But it's when you're talking about Joey Porter Jr., to me, it's not about the interceptions, not about that. It's about, is this guy going to be able to handle players who can defeat his physicality? And that's my question. Shannon, what do you think?
Well, I was concerned. My main concern with Joey Porter Jr. is, I think he relies so much on that length. And that wingspan is one of the longest wingspans you'll ever see in a cornerback. And he, as you say, he uses it at the college level. He was, excellent in press coverage.
Yeah.
And nobody could get away from him. In NFL, I would not have taken Joey Porter Jr. if I hadn't already taken Patrick Peterson. The reason being is you got to have a very specific type of mentor, not just the positional coach, to help him realize, yes, you have a huge advantage with that incredible wingspan, but there's tricks to the trade. There's things you can do, and a tug here and a little, knock him off balance a little bit on this side behind, where the ref can't see. There's things he can teach you. Because, again, we don't know what kind of recovery speed that Porter has because nobody's really burned him.
Yeah, he didn't have to use it.
They showed his junior year, one receiver that just got drafted did burn him and caught a touchdown in the back corner of the end zone. And I cannot remember which receiver it was. but they were talking about it was like one of the few touchdowns he gave up.
Yeah.
And what happened is he did miss the jam.
Mm-hmm.
And when the guy got by him, he just was a little faster. Porter never fully recovered. That can happen. You know, eventually you're going to run up against guys that's maybe a little faster than you. And if the quarterback makes the perfect throw, but again, most of the time, I believe Porter's going to be able to disrupt the timing and the projected route of the receiver using that length. And I think, again, I'm concerned. I don't know if he has bad hands or he just never had opportunities. We're going to find out because he'll have more opportunities now in the NFL. And hopefully he doesn't have bad hands and, Ike Taylor hands. Let's put it that way. But again, I think that he will be able to overcome the growing pains. Again, I don't think he'll start. I think it'll start out the year. It's going to be Peterson and Wallace. And then they're going to work him in. And that'll be optimal for him. The young man was very upset he didn't go in the first round. Yep. And, Paisley was telling him, well, remember that. Put that chip on the shoulder and use that as fuel. He seemed like he has a pretty good work ethic anyway. That's just going to add fuel to the fire. So I expect him, again, to have that competitiveness, to have those prototypical length that few guys can match, to go along with athleticism. And I think he could be, and he better be, the first true cornerback one the Steelers have had since Ike Taylor.
I do like one of the things you mentioned, Patrick Peterson. He was on Patrick Peterson's podcast with Bryant McFadden that he has, and they had Joey Porter Jr. on there, and Peterson was talking, and by the end of it, he was like, "Man, I hope we get to work together." Like that was one of the sentiments. Is Patrick Peterson was like really already like chomping at the bit of like, "Man, I got stuff to teach this kid," right? And when they talked about it after he was drafted, Peterson was excited. Yeah. So, Joey Porter Jr. had a work ethic. That man wasn't a slouch. If you ever saw that dude take his, like when he just had the pads on, he did like the thing. That dude was ripped. That dude was always working, right? Joey Porter was no joke. His son knows what it takes. He was around it. They talk about it. He was around the team. He knows what the work is, and he's got someone who is excited to work with him. So I'm very high on his ability to translate. I'm not as worried about like his speed. Some people are saying, he's a bit slower, but if you look at most of the Pro Bowl corners are in that same speed range. Yeah. Those super fast guys rarely work out at cornerback. It's the guys in the middle that end up being really good. I think he's going to make it. Here's one thing that really intrigues me is, do you think they try him in the slot, in the nickel?
I mean, with that length and that wingspan, I mean, that would be something. I mean, especially if they're pressing, and because they've got some guys now who can press. And if they really do that, I mean, it'd be hard for a lot of them guys to get away from him in that slot. It really would.
And when you're in the slot, if you do, we saw it with Mike Hilton. We've seen it even like with other. If you're getting beat deep in the slot, you have help. Yeah. You have more help there than you do other places. So I think that would really free him up to be more aggressive, be more physical. He's also a good tackler, good against the run. Find out if he's a good blitzer. I would be very interested. People are saying, "Oh, he's an outside corner," but man, I'm kind of thinking he could really be something in the slot. It wouldn't be the typical slot player. Yeah. But if you're dealing with those guys that are quick and shifty, just get his hands on him. Joey Porter Jr. is going to direct him and keep him from beating him too bad.
And you're talking about early in his career, because eventually he is going to be our slot. Our outside number one corner. Oh yeah. But you're talking about early to get him in the packages and all, and it makes sense. It really does.
Yeah. I know people are saying Patrick Peterson could slide into the nickel. Well, that's a projection. He hasn't done it before. No. I think honestly, if they were going to do that, because of his experience in zone and doing a lot of cover 3 stuff and a lot of different things Peterson has done, I think you would see Patrick Peterson in dime move inside, at which point Joey Porter Jr. is coming in outside in dime packages like James Pierre would last year. And at that point, he's not playing a ton, but he's still getting on the field. If they can put him in the slot, he's playing a lot.
Yeah, playing
now
more.
You're playing more than 50% of the snaps. So we'll see. We'll see where he ends up. Last year, look at the injuries we had. You know, a lot of players played outside corner. He will get a chance to play.
Yeah.
At some point. All right. Keanu Benton, the other second round pick. Keanu Benton is interesting to me. He's not really a nose tackle. He plays nose tackle, but he's not really a nose tackle on film. I don't see that being a long-term position for him. But he's also not the athlete you want as a 5-tech defensive end, like you see with a Cameron Hayward. So he's kind of an in-betweener. And if he's a 3-tech, if he's a 1-tech, you want more pass rush out of those guys. You want something in pass rush. He offers a little bit through hustle and hard work, but he doesn't really have good moves. He doesn't really have an offensive attack repertoire. He doesn't have that burst off of the line like a Javon Hargrave had, that first step, or even Stephon Tuitt, that first step that was just brutal to deal with. And one of the reasons I say he reminds me of Cameron Hayward is if you go back and look at Cameron Hayward was very athletic. But when he started out with the Steelers, he didn't have that great first step. He didn't have those pass rush arsenal. He would start off, he'd lose first contact, and then just fight. After that, he would lose the initial start, and then he would just fight his way into something, into being like at least good, you know? And obviously Hayward's developed into who he is now. Right. But Benton is a less athletic version of Cameron Hayward to me. And I kind of wonder, like, in the next couple of years, where is he going to end up? Where is he going to be? Because while I see him as a kind of a Tyson Alualu, which is a comparison I know a lot of people have made, I also see a lot of Isaiah Buggs in Keanu Benton. And to me, he could just end up being a better version of Isaiah Buggs. And be a good rotational player, not the bottom of the rotation player that Isaiah Buggs was, but one you're like willing to play, like a Chris Wormley level of rotation where he's coming in, but he's not a starter. And I worry that the Steelers might have picked that guy in the second round for their defensive line. Shannon, where are you on Keanu Benton?
Well, just Isaiah Buggs just got a second deal with the Detroit Lions. Yeah. And he actually really helped them a lot last year after leaving. You know, the Steelers didn't re-sign him. So I think Benton is a quite a bit better than Buggs. Buggs was a 6th or 7th round pick. And, you know, he was a guy who was – I understand where your comparison is because Buggs is not flashy. He's not – he's just solid. And I tell you where my opinion on Benton went up during the Senior Bowl practices. Because they had him matched up against a lot of these guys that went in the draft this year. Some of the guys he went up against, during his junior, senior years in college, they give him fits, Ohio State, people like that. But like when he was matched up on them one-on-one drills, you've seen that he was more athletic and had potential to be a much improved pass rusher. Now we know he has good length, good arm length, and he's good at keeping guys away. He can do that one arm like Cameron Hayward does, and kind of control them and move around to where he can flow down the line. He is a run defender. He's going to be solid, I believe, right out of the gate, and I believe that he will get a lot of playing time at nose tackle. Eventually, it will depend on his development. If he can work with Hayward, that's the perfect guy to work with him. Because I was watching a game, there was a replay of a Cleveland playoff game against the Steelers, and Hayward's coming off the bench, and I forgot all about that. It just shocked me seeing him not getting to play much, and he didn't look the same. He wasn't nowhere near as big as he is now. He's coming in the rotation and playing 2 or 3 plays and not doing anything. And going back out, and I'm just like, wow, this just don't seem right. And then you remember his first 2 years, he didn't really do anything. So I think that Benton is ahead of where Hayward actually was at that time as far as NFL ready to contribute as a run defender. Because he's going to play nose, and they're only going to expect him to do what – he's the modern day Steeler nose tackle. And I'm one of the guys that's been comparing him to Tyson Alulu because I think that the Alulu we seen in 2020, when Alulu, Tuitt, and Hayward, I thought was the best defensive line in football, that's who I think he can emulate this year. Because Alulu had, 2 sacks? I mean, he didn't offer him a lot. He collapsed the pocket a little. But that's what I think we're going to see out of Benton. And eventually, I think he's a little more athletic than people give him credit for. If he can develop some pass rush, and especially using that strength that he has like Hayward, I think he could replace Hayward because I've said before, I think Hayward will eventually move in. He's either going to have to take a pay cut, move inside to play nose tackle, or he's going to have to go somewhere else. And I don't want to see that. So I'm thinking in a year or two, he might be the guy that moves out and replaces Hayward. You're muted.
People were talking about how Isaiah Buggs was better in Detroit this year. And I wanted to real quick look this up because I wanted to get the numbers on it. Because when he played for the Steelers, he mostly played inside. But Isaiah Buggs was an A-gap defender, a 1-tech or a 0-tech. Normally a 1-tech. When he moved to Detroit, they moved him to the B-gap. He was a 3-tech guy. And he's much better there. When I was watching Keanu Benton's film, his play, his skill set, and his play style looks like a 1-tech. But he was so much more successful and looked a lot more disruptive when he was a 3-tech. So that when I look at that, I'm like, okay, you want him to be your Cam Hayward. You want him to be a Larry Ogunjobi. You don't want him to just be a nose tackle. But I don't think he's ready for that yet. I think that transition will come. So I'm going to agree with you there. I think he's going to get a good amount of rotational snaps just because who's in front of him.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a run play where it's just goal line, short yardage stuff, and you want just a big body in there, it's Braden Fehoko. But I think otherwise, this guy's going to be in there a lot on 3-4 sets, first down, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see him at least have a very good chance to win that job. I'm not going to commit to him winning it. So we'll take a little break. We need to take a break here, and we'll take that. And when we get back, we'll continue with Darnell Washington. And we're back here on the Curtain Call podcast from Steel Curtain Network. Shannon and I were talking about the first 3 Steelers draft picks, the 3 guys that went in the top 50. Now we're moving out of the top 50 into the 3rd round. Steelers traded back, still managed to get Darnell Washington. Now, here's my bad news on Darnell Washington. Darnell Washington was the number 2 tight end at Georgia. And that is an important thing to remember. He was never their number 1 tight end. Now, the other guy was good too, right? Georgia is stacked. They've got a lot of players. They got backups who are playing in the NFL. They got backups who never really started and got drafted in late rounds this year. It was crazy. But I want to give you his games played and his receptions by season here. In 2020, he played in 10 games. He caught 7 passes. In 2021, he played in 10 games. He caught 10 passes with 1 touchdown. In 2022, his last season in college, played 15 games, caught 28 passes and 2 touchdowns. That's less than 2 catches a game. For all the highlights we see, for all the plays he made in those few, targets and receptions, he didn't even catch 2 a game, right? There's no arguing this guy has great blocking in college and that is very likely going to translate. He's a phenomenal athlete and athletic numbers and like your scores and stuff, the SPARK, the RAS, the different things, percentiles, all of that translates very well. Tight ends do very well the higher their athleticism is. So this guy has all that potential. But he hasn't used it yet, right? Outside of a blocker, he hasn't been that guy. And if you look at a lot of his receptions, most of his plays where he's catching the ball are the same kind of plays they were running for Zach Gentry. So while this guy has the tools to be great, he could end up just being a better version of Zach Gentry, which isn't necessarily bad, but the hype on him is this guy's going to be like crazy good. Hopefully he makes that, but I think it's more likely that this guy is a very small bit player in the offense and not a major player when it comes to catching the ball. When it comes to blocking and on run plays, I think he'll be more involved. What do you think, Shannon?
Well, it's funny. The guy that playing ahead of him, and it was a lot of times they would have Georgia would have Washington and Bowers lined up next to each other. Whereas Washington would act like another tackle blocking, and then Bowers would go out, and then Washington would go out on a delay. He would block it first, and then he would get out late into the route on a delayed route. Washington was like your second option at tight end.
Yeah.
Because Bowers is projected in the top 10 to be a top 10 pick next year. He was considered to maybe be the best tight end if he would have come out this year, but he wasn't eligible. So this kid is really, really talented. So anytime you have somebody that good ahead of you, as a receiving tight end, look at George Pickens' numbers when he was at Georgia. They've got a lot of talent on that team, not just on defense, a lot of offensive talent. So a lot of those guys' numbers are lower because of the amount of NFL level talent that played with them. Their teammates, it was hard for them to have huge numbers. When we talked about this, when we was trying to figure out who the Steelers should go with their first round pick, and I said tight end. And I wrote an article about it, and I wrote about Michael Mayer, and I wrote about Darnell Washington. The reason why is because two things. One, insurance in case Freiermuth continues to have concussions. Two, a two tight end set in Matt Canada's offense, he knows how to use that guy. Mm-hmm. He is not good with scheming wide receivers open. Now, I know we got in Thomas, and hopefully he'll help with that part. But we know that the offense the Steelers have been using, and it worked at the end of last year. They're wanting to do bully ball this year. And the perfect tight end out of the whole draft, in my opinion, for the Steelers. He's not the best tight end in the draft.
No.
But the perfect tight end for the Steelers is Darnell Washington because of all the things he can do in run blocking and pass blocking, working the seams, working the red zone, all the things they need. That's what he can offer. We've seen him scheme some really nice plays to get Gentry the ball last year. He was limited what he could do after he got the ball because he was limited athleticism. That's not the case with Darnell Washington. Washington is instantly going to be an upgrade. He is a weapon. And it ain't about how many receivers you have or how many running backs, tight ends. It's how many weapons. And this kid is going to be a weapon. We talked before the show. To me, he has a lot of Gronkowski in him. And the fact that he is that kind of mismatch, he's just too big and too powerful for any safety or cornerback to deal with. And then he's too athletic and fast for a linebacker. And we watched how the Patriots used Gronkowski to destroy the Steelers. Yep. And I just see in this offense, he's not going to put up huge numbers. But I don't see any of the I think Washington was the perfect guy, the perfect tight end, and the perfect offensive weapon to add to this offense.
All right. I love it. I love it, Shannon. And honestly, I agree. One more thing, two more things I want to really quickly handle with Darnell Washington. If you watch Broderick Jones and Darnell Washington when they were communicating back and forth on social media, those two are close. Yeah. Those two are really good, like the best friend, like they're really good friends. And they're going to be working together again. It's going to be a lot of fun seeing those two go together. And one more thing I wanted to cover, because he's been talked about his injury concerns. Looking into that, there was some people breaking it down and showing that like a lot of that doesn't seem to have any foundation in reality. Mm-hmm. He's never had like surgeries done. He has had surgery on a knee, but it was to relieve some. It was like to clean up some things. It was not an injury. It was not an issue. It's big guys and knees. Sometimes you gotta get stuff cleaned out of there. Now, I can assume that probably would worry some people in the NFL. He did, I think, have 2 injuries on the same foot earlier in his career. So there are some minor concerns there. And basically, the concern is he's that big, he's that heavy, he's that fast. That's just really hard to maintain on your knees and on your legs. That's very physical wearing on you when you block like he does, when you do the stuff he does. But I'm not worried about the medical side with him. I don't think that's a real concern. His first real injury will be his first. Like that's where he is. He hasn't had those.
If you watched, the only thing that ever stopped Ron Gronkowski was injuries.
Yep.
And it was a lot of back related stuff and hip. But like you said, when you got a guy that big, you're looking at a 6 to 8 year career, maybe not 8 to 10 year career. But if he's used correctly and he can be dominant during that time as a specialist in what he specializes in, you can't go wrong with that pick. He just is the perfect fit, really.
Yeah, I agree. Next up, we have Nasty Nate's little brother, the Steelers' 4th round pick, Nick Herbig, who I hear will not be the Steelers punter. I'm sorry, Shannon. He's already filled. Nick Herbig, he's an outside linebacker, but he's undersized. He's not a creator. He doesn't disrupt as much. He's kind of a finisher. Like, he's a guy that runs around and he finds the ball. He's got a lot of high motor, a lot of hustle. I like him as a special teams player, as a rookie. I don't think he'll stick as an outside linebacker in a 3-4 defense at his size. I have wondered, I got questions about that. He's a little small. Even guys who are considered smaller for that position, like a Quincy Roche, right? He was considered a smaller edge. He's 15 pounds heavier than Nick Herbig. Just to start, like that, when he came out, he was 15 pounds heavier, and they were like, this guy might be too small to be an edge rusher. Nick Herbig is not going to have trouble making the team. Like, they need bodies. He's on the team. He's not polished. I don't see him getting a major rotation role early on, and I worry that we drafted a guy seeing potential in someone that really it's not there. In fact, like, really, if you look at it and you want to compare him to a prospect from before coming out of the draft, take TJ Watt, make him smaller and less athletic. TJ Watt had like a few kind of pass rush moves that weren't polished at all, but mostly he just ran really hard and he tried really hard and he fought people and he made things happen with hustle. That's Nick Herbig. The problem with Nick Herbig is he's not nearly the athlete TJ Watt was, and he's not as big as TJ Watt was. So I don't see him developing anyway like TJ Watt did. And there's a fine line between, in the NFL, it's not a big gap between being like a backup player and being a really good starter. There's not a huge gap in performance there. It's just, are you better than that guy across from you? And if you're not as good as him, you're losing. If you're this much better than him, you're going to win all day. It's not a big gap, and I don't think he's making that gap. I think this guy is at best a career backup. I think he fits best in a defense that moves him out of outside linebacker and makes him an outside linebacker in like a 4-3 defense. Something like that would work better for him. I like his hustle. I love his heart, his playmaking instinct. When he gets in there, he finds the ball, man. This dude finds the ball, which is what I'm excited to see him on special teams because of that. But I don't see him as a potential future starter for this team. I don't see him even becoming a major rotational player that we're like, he's making plays and getting sacks and doing things. I just don't see it. Shannon, how do you see Nick Herbig?
This is the first one that we see it very differently. I see Nick Herbig is a wild man. I mean, he plays like his hair is on fire. He's a nonstop motor guy. He's 2 inches shorter and 15 pounds lighter than TJ. He will get heavier. He'll probably end up playing around 250, which will be fine. He's 2 inches taller than James Harrison, at least 2 inches taller than James Harrison. He has the work ethic and the intensity to improve. Now, he is a tweener. He's a hybrid.
Yep.
He's what Mike Tomlin talks about when he says wanting to go to an NFL that is positionless players, where guys can be moved around in formations and do a multitude of things. You put TJ Highsmith and Herbig out there at the same time, all of them have played off ball at one point or another in their careers. All of them can drop in there. Watt and Highsmith are much better coverage than Herbig is, because Herbig hasn't been asked to cover anybody. But when you want to give Watt this first year, special teams demon, you want to give Watt or Highsmith the rest, you bring in Herbig. He's constant motion. He will not waltz and dance around with the lineman. They might block him initially, but if he'll make the complete circle. He'll go all the way around. He never stops. Mm-hmm. The guy is 100% effort consistently and constantly. Those guys make plays. They find the ball. That's what I want. I don't want the guy standing there patty caking or running away from the action, Devin Bush. I want the guy who is a hard-nosed baller and finds a way to get it done. He'll crawl under you. He'll climb over you. He'll go around you. But he will get there. And he is not a bad athlete at all. He is a solid athlete with a decent RAS score. All the guys the Steelers picked up had a good RAS score. So I see a lot more potential. My only question is, will he eventually be an off-ball linebacker because of that nose for the ball? He just has that aggressive nature that he plays downhill. He looks like an off-ball linebacker playing on the edge. But he shows that he can be successful at Wisconsin. And he had some decent games against some really good tackles while he was playing for Wisconsin. So I think he will not only make the team, but I think he will give them solid minutes in a rotation, especially as a pass rush specialist starting out. And then eventually the coaches are going to have to decide, where's his optimal position moving forward? Is it off ball or is it the edge?
See, I think one of my sneaking suspicions this whole offseason has been the Steelers might be moving more towards that hybrid, that positionless thing Mike Tomlin talks about. As this roster increasingly reminds me of Brian Flores' 2021 Dolphins, where they went very hybrid, very aggressive, and used a lot of inside linebackers outside and a lot of outside linebackers inside. Nick Herbig is that guy. And if the Steelers, if this is not just me seeing things that aren't there, and that is really what they're going to, I think Nick Herbig has a future, has a real role with this team, especially in that kind of defense. Well, we got a little bit of time here left. We got two more players to go to. The 7th round picks. Corey Trice, man, I love this guy. I put a lot of work into his film room. I'm doing that. That should be coming out soon. We're just waiting for the ones in front to get through on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Make sure you're checking for that. I'm very high on him. Now, let me tell you how high on Corey Trice I am. His very best film, his best games, I like better than Joey Porter Jr. When Corey Trice has his best games, I like him better as an NFL corner than Joey Porter Jr. The problem is, while Joey Porter Jr. has a career full of good to great games, Corey Trice is all over the place. He has phenomenal games. Like, really, if you want to watch a great game for both our cornerback prospects, watch Purdue-Penn State. Watch that game, the start of this last season. Phenomenal play from both of these cornerbacks. If you want to be high on both of them, phenomenal play. It was one of the few games Joey Porter Jr. actually got targeted. Just was phenomenal in that game. After that, no one targeted him anymore. Corey Trice was one of his best games. He has the same level of ability to physically interfere with receivers, but he doesn't rely on it as much as Joey Porter Jr. You will see plays where he disrupts the route, gets his hands off of the guy, and then comes back in to break up passes. Phenomenal stuff. The problem with him is, with that inconsistency, is his career arc is crazy. He became the starter in 2019 towards the end of the season. 2020, the Big Ten was all kinds of messed up. It was the COVID season. That's one of the teams that didn't practice much. He didn't
Mm-hmm.
he did, and he played 6 games. They weren't very good. None of them stand out. Like, you really can't draw much from that season. 2021, he's the starter. He comes in, he plays 2 games, and he tears an ACL. He comes back in 2022, and he's not 100% yet. They constantly were saying this guy is not nearly, back. This guy is not 100% back. You watch that Penn State game, he looks really good. You go 2 weeks later against Syracuse, ooh, it's bad. It's not good. He doesn't even look like he wants to be out there. Like, there's plays where you're just like, he gets blocked and he doesn't really even try to find the ball. And you're like, what, who is this guy? Who is Corey Trice? And here's the thing. It could be that Penn State game, that's Corey Trice, only that was 80% Corey Trice, right? He could be better than that game because he wasn't 100% for that game. Or it could be he's inconsistent, and that's the reality of him, and the injury just wasn't the factor that made him inconsistent, Or it could be that 2 weeks later in Syracuse, it was really bothering him. He tweaked it or something. It was bothering him, and he wasn't good that game. You don't know. And that's the thing with Corey Trice, to me, is he could be great. He could be, a Kello Weatherspoon kind of, give you 2 or 3 good games, and then after that, you want him off the field as fast as you possibly can get him. I don't know. But for a 7th-round pick, I love the pick.
Mm-hmm.
Shannon, how do you feel about Corey Trice?
I'm going to try to keep it short. I'm very excited about that pick. When he kept falling, because he was on the top 10 remaining guys, he was on there for the 5th, 6th, 7th round. And I was like, why is he falling? So when they got him in the 7th, I couldn't believe it. And I did a deep dive to try to figure out why that this guy, who was ranked 66 by Daniel Jeremiah, 105 to 122 by about every publication, you get him at 241. What happened?
Yep.
I looked for arrest records. I looked for stuff on Purdue's site about, was he a problem to the coach or with teammates? What made it happen? He broke his ankle at the end of his senior year. And, he missed the All-Star game and stuff like that. Well, then he goes to college and he hurts his ankle.
Yep.
Then 2020 happens. Then he hurts the knee. It's all the same side, same leg.
Yep.
And if you look at his time frame, he never fully rehabbed. If you don't take the time, do proper rehab, proper length of rehab, you can have an alignment problem. If you have an alignment problem, naturally, you're going to keep hurting the same extremity on the same side. And that's what kept happening. His senior year, he wore a brace for 3/4 of the season because he didn't trust it. It was mental. Then they finally said, hey, you're fine. You need to take the brace off. And he did. And he finished out the year strong. The second half of last year, he was one of the best corners in the Big Ten. And if you watched him, as you said, those games, that first game, he was blanking the guys to whereas he wasn't pass interfering, but he was like draped over him. His arms ain't quite as long as Porter. But other than that, he is the doppelganger. He is Joey Porter's doppelganger without the famous daddy, the famous last name. Trice could have easily went in the 3rd round. The only reason he fell to the 7th is because it was a deep cornerback class, and because of the pandemic, there was more 5th and 6th year seniors in this draft class. And it knocked guys that would have normally been 3rd or 4th round down to 4th or 6th round. And he fell all the way to the 7th. It does not make any sense.
Yep.
But now you got Porter, you got Peterson, you got Trice, you got Wallace. You don't know about Witherspoon. You got Pierre, who's better at press. That's what he done better when he was in college. You've got a team that has to press now. They have to be more aggressive to take advantage of this talent and this length. They have the biggest corner group they've ever had in Steeler history. These guys all have got height and length. They've got it all. So to me, Trice was an absolute steal. I think he's an eventual starter. But I tell you what, I think he's going to be the biggest advantage of him his rookie season is a tight end shutdown guy. They no longer have Terrell Edmonds.
Yep.
And Terrell Edmonds, if a tight end started out having a good game, Terrell Edmonds come in and shut him down. They don't have that anymore. Keanu Benton is not that guy.
Nope.
They brought in Tanner Muse, who is kind of the hybrid guy, and I think that might be a little bit of the plan with him. But to me, the guy that would really be able to do that and handle the physicality of a tight end and blanket him is Trice. So it would not shock me at all if he doesn't have a role early in the season as that shutdown tight end coverage guy.
I would love that. And I want to mention one of the things I think he could do his rookie season. He did play safety. I think he can be a dime back. He's got a chance to win that job. But he's obviously behind a number of people just starting out. The Steelers have, Peterson, like the guys that are up there, the top 3 guys are obvious. If he's going to be number 4, he's got to beat out Arthur Millette. He's got to beat out Chandon Sullivan. He's got to beat out, a lot of veteran players. He's got to beat out a lot of people to take that spot, including James Pierre, including Trey Norwood. Guys like that who have won those spots in the past. It's going to be hard for him to get snaps on the field, but I think dime is one place he could. He does have a background playing safety. He does seem to play the ball well in zone. I'd be interested to see him kind of get some roles in that too. And like you said, you put him on some tight ends and see what he can do.
Sullivan, all the Minnesota Vikings fans were saying good riddance to bad rubbish. I want to trust them that they know what to do, but I think they brought in a body. And I don't think he will even beat out Millette. And we know that Millette is a cheaper version of Hilton. And I like Millette, but if it comes down to it, I think Trice is the better player than Millette, and I think he can beat Millette, especially if they use Porter some in the slot. Because here's the thing we got to remember too. James Pierre is a great gunner. They brought back Miles Boykin, who's a great gunner. But guess what Trice was in college? Trice is a great gunner.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's value on them special teams too.
Yeah, it's gonna be good camp battle. There's a lot of places that are gonna be in good battles this season. We got one last guy to cover really quickly. Spencer Anderson. I don't have much negative to say about it. He's a 7th round pick. I can't really tear apart 7th round picks. They're a 7th round pick for a reason, right?
Yep.
He was a really good pass graded blocking tackle. He looks good on film. Maryland people will tell you he was their best, most reliable blocker. He's just not a guy that is your typical build for the NFL. Apparently, there's quotes of him talking about he's worked at center, at snapping the ball, at all the things for center and technique with other coaches, with individual coaches, his entire time he's been in college. He kept that as something he wanted to have. And also, this obviously understood that was his best chance to make it in the NFL, was to show, hey, I can also play center. I've already played guard. I've already played tackle. I can play center. The hardest thing for this young man isn't just the fact that, the transition of a 7th round pick trying to make it in the NFL. You're not getting special attention. You're not getting that, you're not the guy getting prepared to start. You don't get as much attention from the coaches, all that stuff. This guy has to deal with the Steelers' interior line depth. And that's not a small group of people. And that's not an unknown quantity. That's like, there's 4 starters. There's 4 starters at guard, and then you've got, Mason Cole at center. Shannon, does he have much chance of making the squad this year? Or do you think this is a guy that's going to kind of go to the practice squad and get a year of seasoning?
It took me a long time to write my last 2 grading the pick articles. With Trice, I had to figure out why he fell.
Yep.
With Spencer Anderson, I had to figure out who the heck is this?
Who is this guy?
I'm like, who is this guy? So I started doing a deep dive on him. And I learned a lot. And I trust Andy Weidel as the, king of the round bellies. And he knows these guys. So I said, there's got to be a reason. During his tenure in Maryland, he played all 5 positions.
Yep.
He played mostly tackle. He played a little of guard. And I think he had 5 to 8 starts at center in emergency. And from the guy, when my article posted, Maryland fans would come in and say he was the best and most consistent lineman. Now, there was a guy drafted ahead of him, but he was the most consistent. He's a jack of all trades, master of none. But he is a much better athlete than people realize. His RAS score is
9.37.
Yep. He's 6'5", so he's got length. He's built kind of funny, but he anchors well. And I think if you look at the makeup of this offensive line, I think that he will be viewed. They're going to let him compete for backup center. Hassenauer's gone. Kendrick Green never panned out. To me, they have guys who can play center in Daniels and Samalu and Herbig, but you don't want to move these guys if you can help it. I think they're going to let Anderson compete at center and be the ultimate swing offensive lineman where he can actually fill in. We've had guys in the past that have done that, who can play multiple positions. I remember when Fowler played 3 positions, guard or center, when he first came in. And, of course, he eventually become a tackle. But I see Anderson would probably be practice squad and have him there if there's an injury, which you know how it is on the offensive line, that you can easily bring him in to give you that quality guy on the sidelines to back up. But I think that Anderson could do that Ramon Foster type thing, do that Kelvin Beachum, that, these guys that don't look a certain way, but they're just players. They're ballers. They're intelligent. He's very smart. You have to be very intelligent to be able to play 5 positions. So I think that he could come in, have a little bit of practice squad time, and then maybe eventually be a good backup center.
The hope for him is that he can do that he can be that guy, win a spot with his center guard versatility, and be that backup. I think you're looking at, maybe the Steelers, the situation where he makes the 53 this year would be the Steelers almost have to trade somebody. Otherwise, I think, obviously injuries. But otherwise, I think you're right. I think he ends up on the practice squad. Yeah, we're about out of time here. So to finish up, make sure you're going behind the steel curtain. Shannon has did a whole bunch of grades on these players. If you want to get a more in-depth view of each player from Shannon White's perspective, go to behind the steel curtain. You can even, I think there's a way to search by author. You can search for Shannon stuff and find his articles on grading all of these players. He puts a lot of work into it. Really good stuff, as always, from Shannon. You can look at me. I've done 2. I've got 1 already out and 2 more coming. Film rooms on players. I did the Keanu Benton one. That one's out. Corey Trice is coming, and I'm finishing up the I just lost his name. Spencer Anderson one. I'm finishing that one up. Make sure you're checking those out. If you want to see stuff about the guy we signed, Shannon Sullivan, you can see the Vertex. We did a Vertex on him and what he brings to the table. So check that out, behindthesteelcurtain.com. Make sure you're sticking with us here at Steel Curtain Network. The draft is over. We're looking at, rookie signing, rookie camp invites. We're looking at undrafted free agents. There's all kinds of stuff going on. We're still in the post-draft week. That isn't even passed yet. And then we'll be moving on into camps, all these stuff. Stay with us all off season here at Steel Curtain Network. We're going to be covering the Steelers from all sides and all angles. We got everything you want. That's something we haven't done. I don't know if you've done this, Shannon. What's your overall grade for this draft class?
Overall, I have to give it an A.
Hey, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I think you have, whether they're starters or not, your first 3 picks are going to, well, you 3 of your first 4 picks are going to be impact players. Keanu Benton is the only one I'm questionable on. And that's just, it may take him a little while, but I think 3 of these guys are going to be impactful day one on this team. So for me, top grades for this draft class. And we'll see how it turns out. Obviously, we don't always know not everything. Sometimes we're horrible on these draft class, or we throw like, who is this bum? And they turn out to be, really good.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But for Shannon and I, thank you for watching. Thank you for participating in our chat. If you're listening on the podcast network, thank you for giving us our time, letting us come and talk football and Steelers with you. As always, have a great week. And let's go Steelers.